Yeah.
How's it, everyone? My name is Mitch and I'm an addict.
Right.
Sure. Being 7 years clean. It's not something I've really ever thought about, to be quite honest. Especially not in the days of being active. I always had a funny viewpoint of people that lived life sober, were incredibly boring, incredibly dull, didn't really have any fun in life, and it was never something that really interested me. I thought the only way to really kind of have fun was to be off your rocker, really. So a quick little brief history. I'll try not do too many of the war stories or anything like that. So I grew up in Joburg, East Rand of Joburg. Was very fortunate in terms of I went to private schooling for most of my life. But I would say from quite early on, I didn't really fit in with everyone around me. Just reason being, there was always something off, and I thought it was because that I liked arts and culture, and as well as being fairly good at sport. So I thought it was because I did both that I didn't really fit in with certain groups at school. Um, so, I did dancing from the age of about 6 or 7. I followed that through until I was about 21, 22, somewhere about there. But then all throughout school, I played just about every sport, and I was fortunate enough to play first team for just about every single sport, except cricket. I found I was quite shit at cricket. But what I do remember is from quite young is I never wanted the fun to stop. If it was sleeping over at a friend's house or doing something fun at school or whatever it was that couldn't stop. It was always another 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes or one more day or one more sleepover. There always had to be one more. There was never, okay, I've had enough, it's time to go home, or I've had my fill. There was just no such thing in my world. And then, just come the teenage years, typical bad attitude kind of set in. Excuse my French, but the kind of like fuck the world idea kind of started to set in. And not just that, with high school starting and being grade 8 and all of that kind of thing, still doing my dancing, and then obviously doing all the first team sports, I experienced quite a bit of bullying. And it's also kind of where I figured out that you can use your hands to get out of bullying situations and get even with people. So it was an interesting time. I can't say it was terribly unpleasant. It was just, kids being kids, really. I also met a girl, I would say my first love in that time frame. She was also at school with me. Absolute nightmare. I think every single terrible part of me came out in that relationship, from the jealousy to the controlling nature to just everything. My focus was never really on school, but my focus is now even less on school. And when that went pear-shaped, it was like the end of life, and during this time, I'd also started socializing with some guys that were quite a bit older than me, at a place called Hartbeespoort. And I'm not one for golf. I've never been one for golf. I can't stand it. It's too slow for me. So at Hartbeespoort, that was the only thing to do. So there was a group of us that just caused a little bit of chaos. Most of the guys were about 2 to 6 years older than me. That's where I got introduced to smoking, which I started smoking just to kind of fit in with those guys. And it's where the drinking, I would say the binge drinking started for me. I can remember the first time we had it. I think we had some quarts from the shebeen that must have been about 10-15 rand each back then. And I can remember smashing as many as I possibly could until I passed out and then vomited. And for most normal people, I think, it would be a case of, okay, well, that was a crap time, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do that again. For me, it was, I can't wait to do that again. Because as soon as I touched that stuff, it was like my brain was free. My brain was quiet. The social anxiety, the fears, the worried about fitting in or saying the wrong thing or being embarrassed, that all just disappeared. It's gone. So it was like magic potion and stuff. And I assumed it did the same thing for everybody. I didn't realize that it worked differently for me than it did for other people. But yeah, I mean, that was at school. So, I continued throughout school. My drinking didn't really play much of a part back then. It was on the odd occasion. And then came time for end of matric. And in the matric, I decided to move out. I was going to go and do a degree, but while living at a digs, working at a school. And I moved out, and I can remember the day I moved out, which I also thought was normal behavior, clearly wasn't normal behavior. The day I moved out, my roommates hadn't moved in yet, and I went down to the bottle store, bought myself a bottle of brandy, a 2-liter Coke, locked myself in the room, and played games, and just drank myself into a stupor, because I thought this was now freedom, so I'm free to drink as much as I want, whenever I want. And I subsequently found out that that's bizarre behavior. That's very much addict behavior. And then I would say I got into the typical party scene, living in the digs with 9 or 10 other guys. It was jawling every third or fourth day. I was in a relationship at that time as well. And then on the 14th of February 2013, I went through quite an intense hijacking attempt. And my world flipped upside down immediately. My aggression went through the roof, my anger went through the roof, my selfishness. I'd always been selfish, and I always just kind of blamed it being an only child and always made a bit of a joke of it. But my selfishness just went to complete next level. I no longer wanted to really have fun in life. I wanted to just cause chaos. And I think there was a part of me as well that wanted other people to suffer kind of like I'd suffered, because unfortunately I had to do something I wasn't very proud of, and something that stuck with me for a long time, in order to get away. But I can't really explain the mental shift. It was it went from trying to have fun when going out and jolling to now when I went out to go joll, it was to drink as much as possible and look for a fight, all the time. It wasn't a case of, oh, just go out and have a little bit of fun and then go home. It was go out to get completely blown, and whatever happens, happens kind of idea. So needless to say, with that kind of attitude, and the girlfriend I was seeing at the time, although her family was very alcoholic, so it suited me at the time, that didn't last. Thank God that didn't last. Yeah, I got to the end of the year where it was now... No, actually, that continued till the end of 2014. That continued. And then it was time to now decide what I was doing with my future, because the degree I was studying, I was kind of half-assing it. I wasn't really wanting to do it anymore, because working at a school, I realized that I actually didn't want to work with little kids and their parents, because their parents are an absolute pain in the ass. And I just didn't really see a future there. So I was trying to find, maybe if I found a different degree or something else that I was happy with, then, I'd be happier in life. And this decision came with having to move back home. And, once you've been living on your own and being a little bit wild and dumb, moving back home to a place where there's rules and curfews and things, that doesn't quite fit so well. But yeah, I had to move back home, and I think that's when everyone around me kind of really started to see how badly the wheels were falling off. And I mean, people brought it to my attention with the way I was drinking and using, that what I was doing was not okay. It was complete in excess, and I was putting myself in harm's way and all that kind of thing. And I really did believe that everyone was just being melodramatic. I thought everyone was talking the biggest load of shit I've ever heard. I'm a young guy, I'm supposed to be going out there, I'm supposed to be creating chaos, I'm supposed to, do some stupid things. That's what we're supposed to do when we're young. But I failed to see how bad my behavior was. I failed to see how I was affecting everybody. I failed to see just how insane the whole situation was. I was comparing myself to people that I deemed were worse than me. And I was going, see, at least I'm not homeless. At least I've still got a job, even though it was a part-time job. I would always compare myself to other people, and I always had excuses, always had justifications, I always had what I believed were reasons why I could behave so poorly and no one could ever say anything to me. And fast forward some time, I started working in gyms, which, I really enjoy working in gyms and being a personal trainer. But unfortunately, when you got the habit like I had the habit, you're never going to stay very fit and healthy for very long. And unfortunately, my using had gone to every single day purely because I just couldn't deal with how rough I used to feel in the morning. So my intention was to never, I would say, get on all throughout the day. But unfortunately, when I have one, my brain doesn't understand stop at one. It understands stop when you fall over. So I'd go to work and I'd try and have one just to get rid of the shakes, just to get rid of the nausea, and just to be able to try and function. But fast forward a couple of hours later, and I was speaking fluent Swahili while trying to train people. It's not exactly a good advert. And not just that, my insanity was I can take 2 scoops of pre-workout, I can fill my shaker with a bottle of vodka, and I can go to gym like that just to get rid of the hangover, and I can just push through and I'll be just fine. And at the time, that was perfectly logical to me. And I thought I got really clever when I did, 2 scoops of pre-workout, 2 rehydrates, and a bottle of vodka all in the same thing, because now I'll be hydrated while I'm getting pissed. And this is just going to be fantastic. And needless to say, it didn't work that way. And I mean, that continued for quite a long time. And, it got to a point where my folks and I, we weren't really communicating that much. I mean, they'd catch me under influence all the time. I would come up with all sorts of bullshit and all sorts of lies and things like that to try and hide it. And excuse me, it got to a point where, I mean, when I was using every day, I kind of knew it was a problem. But I was too arrogant and too egotistical to admit that it was a problem. I'd seen friends be able to drink and use and put it down and continue with their life. And, I had South African colours, I played first team sports and everything. Surely being able to put that down is fairly easy. But I found every time I put it down 2-3 hours later, I'd pick it back up, and I would come up with every excuse under the sun why it was a good idea to pick it up. Why this time would be just one, why this time was special and different. Why everyone else in my life is the fucking problem except for me. I always had that way of thinking, always had that excuse. And not just that, I couldn't tolerate how loud my head was. I just couldn't tolerate the 150 million things going on all the time. It was like white noise on steroids where I couldn't actually hear what else was going on around me. And also, I mean, I convinced myself I couldn't sleep without the stuff. I couldn't shower without the stuff. I couldn't talk to people without the stuff. I couldn't function without it. And then it got to a point where, life was just on its kind of downward trajectory, nice and fast as well. And I can remember, I've been arrested twice already for driving under the influence. And people had said to me, the day's going to come where you're going to write your car off. And I thought, you yokes are talking shit about. I drive better when I'm pissed anyway. So, but needless to say, the day came when I whistled into the back of an A3 doing 140 on William Nickel. And I woke up maybe 50, 80 meters somewhere before I hit that car, which is the only reason I didn't plow straight into the back of it. And I can remember having the accident and the airbag going off and thinking, that seems about right. Life's, the world's out to get me, so this seems about fucking right. And I can remember being so delusional that I couldn't get out the door because of how I had the accident, so I had to climb out the window. And I can remember thinking, if I put the bottle of vodka, which was still on my lap, if I put that under the seat, if I take out my box of Marlboro Reds and I light a Marlboro Red, nobody's going to smell the very cheap Russian Emperor vodka that I was drinking. It comes in a plastic bottle. It smells like nail polish remover. Nobody's going to smell that stuff. And I remember getting out, lighting the Marlboro Red, and then I don't really remember what happened after that. And then from there, like I said, life just continued this downward spiral. And And in between that, I'd spent a night in hospital to have my brain checked because there was a girl I was dating, Shame, who was convinced that I had a mental problem. And I went to go spend a night in hospital where they put this ECG thing on my head to check if, I guess, to see if I actually had a brain, see if all of that was working. And the next day I got my results and everything was fine, except my blood work looked a bit funny. And then the doctor came and told me that if I didn't stop doing what I was doing, like with immediate effect, I'd be dead before I was 28. And I can remember sitting there looking at the doctor who was telling me this, thinking, you are talking the biggest load of shit I've ever heard. You know, I'm 23 years old, basically bulletproof. Like, I've been through a hell of a lot of stuff. Like, my mother's put you up to this because she thinks I'm drinking too much. And I had this thing of no one's ever going to tell me what to do. I'll do what I want, when I want, and how I want. And needless to say, I continued for another year with that insanity. And that's where the writing of the car came in. And then, I'm trying to think. Sorry, my timeline's all over the place because I don't really remember what happened when during that last 2 years. It was all a bit haphazard. Oh yeah, sometime after I'd written my car off, I started seeing a psychologist. And Shame. I think I had 10 sessions with her, and in every single session, again, I was sitting with my shaker with some pre-workout, some vodka, and she had no idea. And I managed to spin her some massive story, which I don't even really remember, that it was my family's fault I was like this, and then it was the hijacking, and it was because my parents are divorced, and this whole massive sob story that was all a crock of shit. And she fell for it, you know, and she told me that I had bipolar disorder type 2, anxiety disorder, depression, and I was borderline suicidal. And fortunately for me, I have a family who are switched on, that don't just listen to doctors and psychologists. And you know, this woman, Shame, she wanted me to go on all sorts of medication and all sorts of things like that. And luckily, my family just knew me as an addict. You know, they knew that was my problem. So I'm very fortunate that I didn't go down that road. But not so long after that, it got to a point where, you know, I'd lost several jobs by this point. I couldn't really keep employment because people would catch on the fact that I was using all throughout the day. So yeah, I got fired from yet another job. And one of my friends, who's actually one of us, she was quite familiar with obviously me and what was going on. She could spot me coming a mile off. She brought me home after one of the days where I'd been fired, and because she was my boss at that time. And she told my family, you want to save this boy's life, you need to kick him out the house. And I don't even think it was 5 minutes later. It was like my family just needed the green light, and I was kicked out the house. I don't remember a hell of a lot from that evening. I just remember being dropped off in Edenvale and then walking my way all the way back to Bedford View. And then at some point in time, trying to climb over an electric fence and getting that horribly wrong. I think I did that more than once as well. And I can remember sitting at the top of that driveway while I was kind of coming to. I had some shorts on, I had no shoes on, I had a vest on in Joburg in May. It's a bit of a shit time to be dressed like that. And the cold will sober you up quite quickly. I can remember sitting there thinking, how the fuck have I got here? Like, how am I sitting at 24 years old, private education, I've had 2 cars, I've had really good opportunities, and I'm sitting here now homeless, not a cell phone, not a wallet, not a friend in the world, not a romantic interest, and my family won't fuck all to do with me. How did I get here at 24? I don't quite understand. And I can remember then going to hide in the bushes because that was a bit warmer than just sitting on the tar road. Unfortunately enough for me, my pops came up the driveway a little bit later on and basically said to me, I can come in the house if I find my sponsor the next day, because I just started going to one of our sister fellowship meetings. and basically follow what he says, which at that point I would have followed him to do anything. So that's exactly what transpired the next morning. He suggested I go to treatment. I was going to go to treatment for 24 days, 3 days detox, 21-day treatment. And I thought they were going to teach me how to just not touch the stuff. But when I got to treatment, I realized that it wasn't the stuff that was the problem. It was me. I chose to pick that stuff up every single time 110% clean. I chose to be dishonest. I chose to be aggressive. I chose to be manipulative. I chose to do all of those things. And there was something fundamentally within the way I was living life that was a problem. I never had a positive outlook on life. I didn't see the positivity in things. I was incredibly negative about just about everything. I'd lost any sort of passions for hobbies. I mean, I've forgotten what my hobbies were other than using. I didn't know what it meant to be a friend. I didn't know what it meant to be a son. I didn't know what it meant to be a boyfriend. I didn't know what it meant to be anything of those things. All I knew was that my life revolved around me and me only, 24/7, 365. And my best thinking got me into a treatment center. That was my best thinking, and I can remember the first few phone calls that I had in treatment. I wasn't exactly in the good books with anybody. But I started to see that there was a solution that was being offered there. I started to see just how many people, their story was very similar to mine. It might have been different colors, might have been different cultures, might have been different races, but our stories were all very much the same. And within that, I think I found hope that things could get better. And I was supposed to, like I said before, I was supposed to be there for 24 days. After about a week or two, I can remember phoning my folks and saying, I'm not coming home. I've got to stay, I've got to finish this. I can't come home knowing, excuse my French here, knowing that I'm fucked and not being able to fix it. Because I know my pattern. I'll come home, maybe 2, maybe 3 weeks, I'll be able to keep things together. And then, boy, the shit's going to hit the fan, and then I'm really screwed. So I decided to stay. Luckily, my folks afforded me the ability to stay in treatment, to complete my treatment. And then from there, I went down to a halfway house. And yeah, I had to live my reality, man. My reality was I had no car, I had no bank account. I was having to live in a halfway house, which was quite rough, with some interesting individuals, to say the least, and start my life from the ground up. I had to get a humble job to pay my rent, to pay for food, and to really start showing everyone that was left in my life that I wanted to change my life and that I wanted those relationships with them, and I was prepared to do whatever it took in order to get better, which is what I did. And that first year of recovery, even though I didn't really have anything in terms of money or materialistic stuff, I had an absolute blast because I got to figure out kind of who I was in recovery. I got to be honest. I got to live in my reality. I got to make some really good friends. But I also got to see the gravity of this disease. I got to see the reality of it, and that it not only can kill, but it does. I went to 27 funerals in my first year of recovery. I've unfortunately buried some very good people around me. One of my best friends I buried because he just couldn't get this right. So I've had lots of reminders. I've had lots of examples of what happens when I don't follow this program 100% to the T. When I go back on my own faulty thinking, when I go back to thinking that I'm special and different. And, I've had this thing where it's just ask, listen, do as you're told, following my sponsor. And every time I've done that, things have worked out. Maybe not necessarily how I thought they were going to work out, generally better than how I thought they were going to work out, but nothing's on my timeline, So it's been interesting. And yeah, things have just progressed kind of from there. I got the opportunity to work in a gym again, and help open that gym. I loved doing that while I worked there. But I got quite bored of it quite quickly, so I needed another challenge, and I was very passionate about recovery. COVID rolled around and I got an opportunity to go work at a treatment center, which I took with both hands. I moved up to Mpumalanga area to go and work at this treatment center, which was a nightmare. I realized there how people can twist and kind of shape things to their own ideal, and how people claim that there's a 12-step program at their work, but it's not a 12-step program, or at least not one that I know. It's not the original that I know. So I was there for about a year, managed to leave there, go back to the South Coast, and shortly after that, this place became available. And my folks and I kind of sat down and decided that the only way we know how to do this properly is to do it kind of our way. Sticking to the originals, sticking to the original step work, and doing the authentic 12 steps, without fiddling and changing anything. So we decided to jump in, kind of boots and all with this. I again moved my life, not that my life had much. I could fit my life into a boot of a car, and have a cat on the headrest behind me. Packed up and moved here December 2021. My folks brought, there were 6 dogs at the time. There were 6 dogs, I think 2 or 3 lots of journeys up and down to Joburg, and we started here on the 1st of December, and our first clients walked in on the 5th of December. And this place has been, it's been work. It's been difficult at times, but it's also been exceptionally rewarding. I'm very privileged to be able to work with fellow addicts every day, trying to spread the message of trying to help people to get better, go from what it was like to being a newcomer to seeing the hope light up in someone's eyes that life can get better. Start seeing families get put together, which when the person walks in here is generally, there's lots of anger, there's lots of frustration. And being able to be a part of seeing that family unit slowly but surely get put together. And I'm fortunate enough now to be within this fellowship a while, where I've seen people get a year, 18 months, close to 2 years now, recovery milestones, and knowing that their journey started with us. And that's been an experience that I can't attach money to, I can't replace for anything, nor do I want to. So, and that all started with the moment I got out of my own way and acknowledged that I was the problem in my own life. And I finally allowed people to help me, because I don't know everything. Even now at 7 years in, I don't know everything. I learn things from people all the time, whether it be newcomers, old timers, doesn't really matter. I'm consistently learning from everyone else. What I do know is I absolutely love this process, because if it wasn't for this process, I wouldn't have a life today. I wouldn't be alive today. I wouldn't have my family sitting right here with me, living in this amazing place, doing the business that we do. I wouldn't be a father today, which, I also didn't think was kind of on my cards, but clearly HB has something else out for me. And there's nothing about my life I would change. Absolutely nothing about my life would change. And that was the funny thing in active. All I wanted to do was change everything about my life all the time. And now today, I'm excited to see what the next 7 years has to hold, but I'm in no rush to get there. I appreciate every single day. I appreciate the fact that I've got my family, I've got this place, I've got recovery, and I've got a brain that's sort of semi-works from time to time. And I've got a memory that actually remembers what happens. And I can finally be of use today, whereas in active, I wasn't useful. In active, I was destructive. And at least now today, I can turn that negative past into a positive future. And hopefully people don't have to go as far down the scales as I went in order to wake up and go, drugs and alcohol isn't the way to live life. There's a lot more to life out there. So I'm going to stop rambling and leave it there. So thanks for letting me share.